Could this be the turning point to end the Russia-Ukraine conflict? President Zelensky has issued a direct challenge to Putin, and the man behind the push for this meeting is none other than Donald Trump. In a surprising move, former U.S. President Donald Trump has called on Ukraine to immediately enter negotiations with Russia. This move has not only raised eyebrows internationally, but also sparked questions about Trump's true intentions. Trump's supporters argue that he is genuinely striving for a peaceful solution to a prolonged conflict that has caused thousands of casualties and disrupted the global economy. However, critics contend that Trump is capitalizing on the situation to re-establish his image as a master negotiator, capable of resolving major crises. Moreover, the political implications cannot be ignored. By urging Ukraine to negotiate now, Trump is also putting pressure on the current U.S. administration. Positioning himself as a peacemaker could potentially serve as a leverage point in the upcoming presidential elections. But why now? Some experts believe Trump sees emerging threats from China. With China steadily expanding its influence in the Asia-Pacific region, Trump may want to resolve the Ukraine conflict quickly to refocus U.S. resources on countering Beijing. However, is Trump truly capable of restoring America's position as a global leader? That remains a critical question. The U.S. economy is grappling with internal challenges like inflation and potential recession. A new confrontation with China could be a risky endeavor. Meanwhile, European allies feel sidelined as Trump unilaterally pushes for negotiations without consulting them. This could create rifts within the Western alliance, which has so far stood firm against Russia. So, what does Trump really want? A peace deal to end the Russia-Ukraine war? Or is this merely a stepping stone for a larger confrontation with China, a nation he perceives as the biggest threat to U.S. global dominance? This is undoubtedly a strategic move, but the final outcome will depend on how Trump handles the situation and whether he can bring all parties to the negotiating table. And Zelensky's response? He announced that he would wait for Putin in Turkey next Thursday. But the big question is, will Putin show up? There have been many negotiations canceled at the last minute before. Will this time be different? Zelensky is clearly betting big on this meeting. For him, this is not just an opportunity to have a direct dialogue with Putin, but also a chance to prove that Ukraine is ready to negotiate despite the heavy losses on the battlefield. However, the Russians are playing a different game. Putin has not confirmed whether he will go to Turkey or not. This creates a tense and ambiguous atmosphere. It should be remembered that, in the past, negotiations were canceled at the last minute due to non-negotiable demands from both sides. This time, Putin could use delaying tactics to make Ukraine and the West lose patience. If Putin does not show up, it could send the message that Russia is not really interested in reaching a peace agreement at this time. Meanwhile, Ukraine has prepared a list of necessary conditions for the negotiations, including a long-term ceasefire and a commitment to the withdrawal of Russian troops from the occupied areas. But is Putin willing to accept these conditions? Some experts believe that Russia will only engage in negotiations if they believe they can achieve strategic benefits or use the meeting to bolster their international image. In addition, there is another factor to consider: Turkey. This country is not only an intermediary, but also a party with strategic interests in the conflict. President Erdogan has repeatedly demonstrated his role as a potential mediator. Can he persuade both sides to sit down at the negotiating table? Or is Turkey just a stage for both sides to showcase their strength and continue playing the blame game? All of this makes the upcoming meeting a dramatic and unpredictable event. Will Putin show up? And if he does, what message will he bring? Will it be a genuine invitation for peace or just another political stunt to prolong the conflict? Meanwhile, on the ground, Russian drone attacks continue despite the temporary ceasefire. But that's just the tip of the iceberg of a larger attack that Russia is preparing. Although negotiations are being proposed, the reality on the battlefield shows that Russia is continuously increasing the pressure. The question arises, is this a tactic to gain an advantage before entering the negotiation table? And if so, how will Ukraine respond? Will it be a negotiation of concessions, or will they stand firm despite pressure from Russia? In recent weeks, Russia has reinforced its forces at hotspots like Donetsk and Luhansk, deploying more troops and heavy weapons to the area. According to intelligence sources, Russia is trying to create military pressure to force Ukraine to make concessions at the negotiating table. Not only has Russia increased troop deployments, but it has also deployed additional long-range missile systems and artillery targeting key cities in Ukraine. The relentless shelling has caused many residential areas to fall into a state of panic, significantly increasing the wave of refugees. On the southern front, Russia is also carrying out attacks with warships and drones on Ukraine's seaports. This is not only a move to pressure the Ukrainian economy, but also aims to cut off logistical supplies and international aid. Additionally, large-scale cyber attacks are also underway. Ukraine continuously reports attacks on telecommunication systems, energy infrastructure, and even military systems. This shows that Russia is not only focusing on the physical front, but is also conducting unconventional warfare to disrupt and weaken Ukraine's defense capabilities. Will there be a meeting? Analysts are skeptical. Many signs indicate that Putin does not actually intend to engage in negotiations, at least not at this time. Since Trump called on Ukraine to accept negotiations immediately, Russia has continuously increased military pressure across all fronts. This shows that instead of backing down, Russia is trying to impose a new reality on the battlefield, aiming to force Ukraine to concede. Meanwhile, Zelensky announced that he would wait for Putin in Turkey next Thursday. But will Putin show up? Many sources from Moscow suggest that this meeting could just be a Russian ploy to buy time and prepare for new attacks. Trump is placing high hopes on this meeting, but the reality is that he may never be satisfied. Putin has never publicly confirmed his participation in the meeting, and if Russia continues to escalate military pressure, it is very likely that they will refuse to negotiate to maintain their strong position on the battlefield. But if the meeting actually takes place, the question arises, what will Russia and Ukraine discuss? Ukraine's negotiation conditions, including the withdrawal of Russian troops from occupied areas, will almost certainly be rejected by Moscow. Moreover, if Russia uses this meeting merely to publicly assert its hardline stance, the negotiations will yield no positive results. So, what can Trump do in this situation? Will he continue to exert pressure for negotiations to take place, or will he have to accept the reality that, in Putin's eyes, this is not the time for negotiations? And if the meeting doesn't happen, it will be a major setback for Trump's negotiation strategy and a reminder that Russia still holds the reins of the war's dynamics. When Trump urged Ukraine to negotiate immediately, many people in Europe felt left out of the game. But in reality, who is being overlooked? While Trump continuously urges Ukraine to negotiate, those words increasingly sound like echoes of emptiness. Because the reality is, America's voice is gradually losing its weight on the international chessboard. Putin, on the contrary, is solidifying his image as a tough, uncompromising leader. By continuously launching new offensives on the battlefield, he is sending the message, Russia will not back down. Negotiation, huh? Only when all conditions are favorable for Russia. In Putin's eyes, Trump is just a loudmouth. The U.S. used to be an absolute power, but now, their voice no longer carries the weight it once did. If Trump truly has influence, why does Russia continue to escalate the conflict instead of sitting down at the negotiating table? And in Europe, EU leaders are increasingly showing disappointment with Trump's approach. They not only feel ignored, but also feel exploited. Trump pushed for negotiations without consulting them, and when the negotiations failed, Europe would bear the brunt of the consequences. So, where does the US actually stand in this power play? Is Trump trying to paint the image of a strong leader, but in reality, he has no real influence at all? As for Putin, despite being sanctioned and isolated, he still stands firm like a true emperor. He doesn't need to say much, just act. If the US really wants to prove its strength, they will have to do more than just talk. Because Putin isn't sitting there to listen to Trump talk. He is just waiting for the right moment to strike a fatal blow. Does Trump really have a clear strategy after urging negotiations? Or is this just a desperate move to regain the image of a powerful leader? The reality is, Trump is increasingly showing his impotence. He continuously makes strong statements but lacks concrete actions to demonstrate America's strength. In Putin's eyes, Trump is just a loudmouth without the power to change the situation. This is particularly evident as Russia continuously escalates military pressure on the battlefield without showing any signs of concern over Trump's threats. Even some analysts believe that Putin is taking advantage of Trump's weakness to strengthen his own position. If Trump truly wants to end the Ukraine-Russia conflict, he needs to propose concrete solutions instead of just talking. But the reality is, the current U.S. administration is at an impasse. They cannot deploy more military forces, nor can they force Ukraine to concede. Meanwhile, Putin is not only taking the initiative on the battlefield, but also creating an image of a tough, decisive leader. He doesn't need to threaten or call for negotiations. Instead, Putin just needs to take action to prove that Russia is still a true superpower. If Trump continues to just talk without taking concrete actions, his credibility will increasingly diminish. Not only on the international stage, but even within the United States, his supporters will also start to ask, what is Trump really doing? And does he have the capacity to deal with greater challenges like China? In this context, it can be said that Trump is in a weak position. He can say a lot, but without concrete actions, those words are just wind passing through the ears. Meanwhile, Putin continues to take steady steps, consolidating his power and proving that he is the one who truly holds the reins of control. As Trump pushes for immediate negotiations, another strategy is unfolding behind the scenes: a rapid push for increased U.S. aid to Ukraine, coupled with efforts to extract valuable resources from the war-torn nation. According to recent reports, Trump is advocating for a new aid package to Ukraine, but with strings attached. The proposed aid includes funding for rebuilding critical infrastructure, roads, bridges, and energy facilities, but also includes clauses granting U.S. companies access to Ukraine's mineral-rich regions. Critics argue that Trump's approach is less about genuine aid and more about securing lucrative contracts for American corporations. Ukraine's vast reserves of lithium, uranium, and rare earth metals have become a key target. These resources, crucial for advanced technology and electric vehicles, are in high demand globally. However, some analysts warn that this strategy could backfire. By pushing for resource extraction in a country still mired in conflict, Trump risks being seen as exploiting Ukraine's vulnerability rather than genuinely supporting its recovery. Moreover, there is growing concern among European allies that Trump's aggressive resource-focused strategy could deepen Ukraine's economic dependence on the U.S., potentially undermining Europe's own investments in the region. The question remains: is Trump genuinely trying to rebuild Ukraine, or is he merely setting the stage for American companies to profit from its resources? And how will Ukraine respond to the prospect of becoming a resource battleground in a conflict that shows no signs of ending?